This panel is IP and AI, what creators and students need to know. And it's a really interesting group. I'll let them introduce themselves. It's a really interesting group of educators and creators, etc. But this should be also another interesting and fun panel. We also have someone from Malaysia. There she is. Hi, Efrat. She's with, go ahead. I'll let you go, Dan.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hello. Hi from Kuala Lumpur. Hi.
It's all yours.
All right, thanks, Bruce, and thank you for your leadership in putting together yet another edition of what seems to be a very successful event. You put AI in it, it's like putting Taylor Swift into the title, and the people just come. Congratulations also. I think you're the only person I know that's had a conference in Northeastern one year and Northwestern the other. So we look with bated breath to see where we'll be next year.
It'll be SMU next year.
No, it's going to be Cornell. If I have anything to do with it.
We've got kids here. Well, welcome everybody. I'm very pleased to be moderating this panel. It's a great panel to talk about education because we are, in fact, at one of the great centers of education in the world, and there is so much to talk about when it comes to AI and education. I'm very pleased to have with me a panel of experts. One in Malaysia. We'll start with Efrat Kasznik, who is the founder and president of the Foresight Valuation Group, and also a lecturer, as you can see from her background from the Graduate School of Business at Stanford. To my left, we have Tiffany Norwood from Tribetan, company that she founded, and if you Google her, you will find any number of wonderful speeches and videos that she has given over the years. And to her left, we have Dan Brown, who is also from Northwestern, from the Sigel Design Institute, as well as the McCormick School of Engineering here. And so, as Bruce said, we really have a wonderful, diverse set of perspectives. So, my first question to the panel, as we focus on the theme of education and AI, is how do you see AI being used in the education space? And read education as broadly as you want. I know not everybody is an immediate affiliation to an educational institute, but we're really talking broadly about education. So who wants to go first?
Oh, I'll go first.
Okay.
I'm home, okay. Well, to set the context a bit, I'm sort of late to the education game. I've been a professor for 14 years, but I started out in industry doing design engineering work, and I had amassed a number of patents. I did entrepreneurial experiences, and thought later in life I'd like to teach. So I got my master's when I was 50, and I defended my PhD when I was 60. And I can't tell you how happy I am to be involved in education. But I feel really, when I look forward, having been through the invention story and my products being knocked off and all that horrendous stuff, as I'm teaching the students, many of them are here, I feel a responsibility to prepare them for the future, because it is quite daunting when I look at it with not just AI, but what's going on. And almost sometimes as I'm teaching, say, a class on IP and product development and trying to prepare them on how to design not just the problem solver, but a sustainable business model, having gone through what I went through, I feel sometimes I wonder if I'm, preparing them for the, the slaughter. But that aside, I really feel it's important to get them prepared for this future, because the students in this room and what's coming up now with AI is just, it's like a Pandora's box to me. And we can't ignore it. They need to be totally prepared for it. We should have more students in here today. And so I think that we've got to keep driving our experience into these young students in education and get them as prepared as possible, understanding the rules of the road and how to avoid the unintended consequences that many of us have had to suffer with the patent system as we move forward.
Any of your students here today?
Yeah, there is a number of them. Yep.
Good.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Well, they're in and out. We're in our quarter now, so, you know, they can't, to take a whole day off, they'd have to, you know, miss some
You
classes.
can give them credit for this.
Blessing.
Well, we have Efrat.
Tiffany, Efrat?
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So it's 4 a.m. where I am, but I'm wide awake. It's a very interesting city. Everything here is open and lively in the middle of the night. So I'm actually here with a group of students, MBA students from Stanford. Students are doing a study trip, and I'm here with my husband, who's a professor, and we're both accompanying this study trip, and we are learning a lot about food tech in Singapore and Malaysia, which are the two countries that we are visiting. So it's a very interesting visit. So my background is I'm a service provider in the world of IP. So I've been an IP valuation expert for over 25 years. In the current iteration of my professional affiliation is I run a company called Foresight Valuation Group, which is a company I started about 12 years ago. And we work across the whole spectrum of the IP world, starting with startups all the way to multinationals and across all sorts of transactions, industries, and geographies. So this is kind of my professional background. As far as teaching, I've been teaching a class. It's kind of a pioneering class at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. It's an elective class called Financial and Strategic Management of IP. I've been teaching that for about 12 years now as well. So the intersection of AI, especially where I'm sitting kind of in the middle of Silicon Valley, this is definitely not something anyone can ignore. And, you know, we've seen AI around. This is nothing new. It used to have different names. You know, it used to be called big data, and then the cloud came, and now it's AI. And with the computing power that we have, things are really starting to happen. So as far as the intersection of AI and education, so this is really, to me, this looks like the early days of the internet. So this is a generation that is going to grow up and of AI savvy. You know, same as internet used to be. The generation of students coming in now are internet savvy and have grown up in the digital world. I see the same thing happening with AI. So I completely agree with the comment before me. AI tools should be embraced and not ignored. And the education system really needs to set up for that generation coming in, or for all the things that are happening. So I see AI impacting education actually in 4 ways. One is as a teaching tool, so a productivity tool, and we can talk more about that. The other one area where there's a huge impact is in academic research. So that should not be ignored. So some of the students are graduate students, PhD students. So from any level, from undergrad to graduate students, as a research tool as well as a productivity tool. The third area that I see that impacting is in tech transfer. So universities, Stanford and other places have been in the kind of the epicenter of launching many technological revolutions, and there's nothing different here when it comes to AI. So technology transfer to industry as well as industry collaboration. We can talk more about that later today. I think we have a topic about that. The last thing is policy. So this is sometimes overlooked a little bit, and I know you had a session on policy, and I'm sorry I missed it. I think you had something about policy, but there's something that Stanford is doing, and I think others may be following this model where universities are also trying to get involved in policy because this is so critical to this area. So these are the 4 areas that I see AI entering education as a productivity tool, research tool, tech transfer, and a policy tool. And I'll stop here.
Thanks, Efrat. Now, Tiffany, since you are going last, in addition to answering the question, I want you to comment also what the 2 of them has just said.
I need a comment on what? Sorry?
What the 2 of them have just said.
Okay. So I'm Tiffany Norwood. I am actually predominantly a tech entrepreneur in the innovation space. I tend to do frontier tech. I've done 9 startups spanning 37 years now. I currently have 3 tech companies, one in ed tech, one in esports, and one in the medical care space. The ed tech company focuses on teaching people all these innovative, future-facing skills and being comfortable with change. I don't know if one of the things I do teach is innovation, and I don't know if this audience knows, but only 2.5% of the general population are natural innovators, which means only 2.5% of the general population feel comfortable with uncertainty and change and disruption, which means 97.5% don't. So when I look at education related to AI, I look at it on 2 fronts. One, around educating everyone about AI from cradle to grave now, because it's going to affect every aspect of society. It's not just an education challenge for university students or people in high school, for example. It needs to be everywhere, everyone, and we can leverage AI to do that, to have personalized curriculum that people can relate to and find accessible, to possibly match up general citizens to each other, to do peer-to-peer education. The second, the other side of it, and I can also add on how it can be used as a professor, et cetera, but I think Dan and Efrat did a good job of that. The other side of it is from the perspective of the current students. So like Dan, I'm an older student. I'm back at school, so I'm both, it's ironic, in January, I was at Cornell teaching 2 innovation classes, one as an undergraduate class, another as a graduate class level. But then also I was starting my semester because I'm currently getting my Master's of Engineering in Systems Engineering at Cornell, focused on AI. And so I have to give a shout out to the Big Red because we have one of the representatives of Cornell flew in from Ithaca. I'm really trying to push, if you haven't noticed, to have the IPAS next year at Cornell. I'll say, if she could fly here, anyone could fly to Ithaca. so what I will share, which is a little bit of a unique perspective, is how currently, as a current student, doing half of my homework up there while I'm listening to the speeches, how we're being told to leverage AI and how we're using AI, as well as the ethics messages that we get from both administration and from the professors. As far as using AI, we are using it. And is it just because we're in the College of Engineering? Nope. Across the campus, I interact with a lot of different students. We're using AI. I'll say specifically the way I use it is, as a education tool, like when I'm trying to remember what's Bayes' theorem again, because I hadn't studied it for 35 years. So one of the speakers mentioned about 10x faster coding. So we'll learn the principles of and I already knew coding from before because my undergraduate at Cornell was also in computer science and electrical engineering. But you can do it so much faster, and to me it's no different from when I was born in the 60s. So when people were debating calculators and using computers in school and homework, you still learn how to do things. It's just in some cases when you need to apply, you can apply it more efficiently so that you can focus on the nuance or extending ideas or being disruptive. And then also there's the generative AI part. They tell us to stay away from it. And to be honest with you, AI does not write as well as human beings do. It's awkward. And I'll show a bit of that when I do my little performance piece at the end. But they at Cornell, they discouraged, and there are ethical issues with regards to using generative AI, say, to submit papers. But for all of us that use Grammarly and other tools, we've kind of been using it before anyway, so I still do, and most students, even in engineering, we have to submit a lot of papers, use Grammarly, for example, to make sure our spelling's correct, our grammar's correct, et cetera, but it doesn't generate the ideas for us. We leverage it for research. We leverage it for also, I guess the equivalent of what you would call, for the equivalent of what you would call prior art with USPTO, I leverage it for that to see what else is out there before, because I'm always coming up with all these crazy ideas. And I want to see, has it been done before? And so I'll use it for like a prior art search tool in an effective way. And we can talk about more of it as we go through the panel. But
Thanks.
that's sort of a teacher's perspective and a current student's perspective.
Thank you. So let's talk for a moment about distance education, because a lot of schools across the different grade levels are facing a population decline as fewer people have kids, go to school, fewer people think of the value of college being something that they want to invest in. More and more institutions, I'm sure including Northwestern, is thinking about how they can roll out distance education in a more cost-effective and a more value-added way. Have you seen or heard AI playing a role? And this, we don't forget you either, Efrat. So at Stanford, if you have heard of this, how has AI leveraged on or played a part in the future of distance education?
Well, I'll jump in. I don't know if I've been involved in distance education, though I had taught online during COVID, which was, I guess, distance education. We were thrown into that like jumping into a fire. But AI, even generative AI, I think can be important in your research and discovery, but we need to teach it so that the human is still doing the critical thinking, evidence-based reasoning, doing appropriate research methodologies where you cite your references, where you make sure that those references are not hallucinatory, and all the proper, I think, proper methods that have always been there. We just can't advocate the thinking to the AI. We just use it as a tool the way any other tools are used. So for online learning or whatever, I don't see it personally that different, as long as we keep the rigor and the skills necessary for the appropriate research and learning in play. It makes it easy to hallucinate and cite. We can't be lazy and allow it to give us false information.
Tiffany?
Okay, so I can jump in here. So if I understand your question correctly, is how should AI be incorporated in education, or are we seeing it coming up in education? So the one thing I want to say...
Distance education specifically, Efrat.
Distance education, okay. So, I've also been thrown into COVID. So I think one needs to draw a distinction between teaching or speaking remotely, as I'm doing now, which is nothing but a delivery method that instead of being in person, being over an IP connection, as opposed to using AI for distance education, which I specifically have not seen. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, the distance education revolution has already happened like 10 years ago with Coursera and places like that. So there was a different kind of revolution. So when you talk about distant revolution, education and AI, I'm thinking about things that I'm not seeing the connection to AI specifically. Where I'm seeing the connection to AI is not so much in the delivery method, being distant or in person, but in the content. And I think one of the points that came in earlier was about the business method. So the business models that you're teaching in business school, which is kind of my intersection with IP education, there needs to be, because the industry is changing so much, with AI changing business model, that would trickle into the curriculum, because you have to kind of dust off some of the things that you're doing and rethinking new business models. And that kind of goes also along what Tiffany was saying about the various startups that she can get involved in. I work with startups a lot, so that's a big part of my business on the business side. And the business model, the transformation is incredible that you are seeing. That needs to go back into the curriculum. So that's where I'm seeing AI coming in, not so much in the delivery, but more into the curriculum. And also to Tiffany's point, I don't see a point in fighting Gen AI or tools like that. This is going to be native to the students. The more the years go by, and even to older students, it's about aligning the assignments with the productivity tools. So moving away from reciting materials, which is what Gen AI can really help you with, and write it for you, to things that involve more critical thinking and things like that. So that's where I see AI intersecting in education.
All right, let me offer you an ideation. And it starts from the premise that everybody in this room enjoys a common privilege. It's called the Anglo-Saxon privilege. Nobody is using simultaneous translation. Everybody is understanding what I'm saying and what all the other panelists have been saying throughout the day. That is not true for probably the majority of the population of planet Earth. And the reverse is also not true. A lot of good stuff that is being spoken in Chinese, in Hindi, in Arabic, in Malaysian, you're not going to be able to understand, and you're not going to be able to appreciate, because there are layers of barriers that prevent an effective transmission of knowledge. In Japan today, if you are a tourist, you go there at the airport, you can rent a simultaneous translation app. You wear it around your neck like a dongle and you speak it, and it goes out in Japanese. The locals speak it in Japanese and you hear it in English. What is it powered by? AI. So if we are able to somehow integrate AI even in the language sense into the mode of our education, the amount of information that suddenly becomes available to us is exponentially greater. I had a colleague that came up during the break. He's now in Kazakhstan. He taught in Chicago previously. They don't speak English. And so these are things which I think sometimes when we sit in a position of privilege in a first world country in the United States of America, we think, of course the world has to be like us. It is not. Let's talk about mentoring, monitoring for a moment, the data set, accuracy, transparency, and really the broader issues of the challenges of integrating AI into education. What have you seen, and what should folks in this room know about some of the challenges about integrating AI into education?
Yeah, well, right now there's no real accountability or verifiability. So when you're using stuff, I haven't had any of my professors formally say do this. It's more suggestive and tangential, like you can experiment with it or have you tried, versus being specifically in the curriculum. And there's a lot of wonky information out there where it goes back to the lack of accountability. And we see it not only in education, but in general society. We had medical examples earlier today, so I'll sort of revert back to the medical field. If you're a doctor, you spent about 12 years plus becoming a doctor for the privilege of treating maybe 30 to 40,000 patients in your lifetime. I don't know, fact check me, but it's something around that, right? There was a time when anyone and everyone could practice medicine, sort of that snake oil era, and then it became a problem because of individuals, a relatively small number of people being hurt or killed because of it. Then you look at what's going on in my industry. We first sort of realized how dangerous it could be as far as the popular culture or the general public, with a lot of stuff around election interference through, basically data attacks or misinformation. It can have a tremendous impact on society. We also look at social media. We're in an election year. In 2008, Obama sort of became the first president elected through social media, and we're now in an election year, whereas this president will be the first president elected through AI. Like whoever is leveraging, I think, AI the best will be elected. As we look at the tremendous impact that can have on general society, us as tech entrepreneurs, and especially for large startups, we're only accountable really to our cap table. And usually a startup like that would be venture backed. The general partners of the VCs are only accountable to their limited partners, which are the people that provide the money. So when stuff happens, it's just sort of like, oopsie, right? Now a doctor, again, for 40,000 people to treat, has to go through all this education and certification and peer-to-peer review. For us tech entrepreneurs, and I include myself because I did $1 billion startup when I was younger that's impacted billions of people. A lot of people in our industry, leaders, they are proudly say that they dropped out of school, right? They don't even bother many times to finish school. And then when these things happen, they're like, how could we have ever known? And I'm like, well, if you bleeping stayed in school, maybe you would have learned about the ethical trade-offs. Do we need to make them stay in school? Do we need to make them go through a process to have the privilege of deploying this technology? Like even before we get into regulation, right? To deploy technology and have a peer-to-peer review, to be able to have these platforms that impact hundreds of millions to billions of people. I think that really is at the foundation of the monitoring. Like it's not the AI or the tech itself. AI is human-derived intelligence. It's, what sort of standard are we going to put in place?
Thanks. Folks in this room may be aware about the push for civics education. Reviving civics education in middle schools and elementary schools and so on. We talked about deep fakes, which I think is really the challenge of our time. We talked about IP and how IP is now slowly finding its way into high school debates. How good a job are we doing as educators in teaching our students about the various key issues related to AI, and how deeply into the education change should we go? Should we start from K to 12 and go up that way? And if so, what does that look like, and what are some of the challenges that come with thinking about educating across the entire value chain?
Well, I'll start with the question about data integrity, and I guess it could be controversial, but I don't know that the integrity issue has changed from, people making up data or using false data sets or even copying. I mean, it happened before, and it's been in academia and it's been in the world all the time. It's the responsibility, the heavy lifting of the researchers themselves, the students themselves, and the faculty to make sure that it is the appropriate data and it's not being made up. So that type of I don't think that's changed much. It's just easier to fake it, I guess, now with AI. But we still have that responsibility. And if you go to school, you go to graduate school, methods and methodologies are important, and you have to respect that. As response to when you start that, I think our traditional academics, teaching the School of Engineering, has been a lot of analytical thinking, rote memorization, and regurgitation. And I really think that we should start critical thinking and this inquiry, design thinking, also ethical and moral thinking much earlier, so we can use the tools that AI are bringing in a better way. How much earlier? Well, I think AI is going to be playing out, as my son tells me, in video games and education and things that are adaptable to young people all the time. So I think it's probably going to start in a gamification way with very young students, but also maybe learning another language or learning the math and science that is appropriate but sooner as they move along.
Thanks. Efrat?
So as I completely agree, and that kind of goes back to the comment that I started with to say this is going to be an AI savvy generation. They're not going to wait to study that in school. It's the same as they don't study the internet in school. The tools are out there, the devices are there. Students are going to pick it up. It's how you incorporate it in education. That's the question. So the issue I'm having is with the teaching AI as a phrase. You need to address the issues with the tools, so they need to understand. So as soon as the students get exposed to the tools, they need to understand that, there's hallucinations and there's things like that. So, they should maybe not trust the data or not, but this is really, really early days. So I think, schools need to form their own rules and regulations. And I haven't seen anything concise anywhere yet. But really, the one thing is not to shy away from the tools, not to forbid using them, because I think that's counterproductive. You can't really fight technology, so it's really it goes into what everybody else has said is how do you incorporate it in a way that is now there's a safety issue in AI, and we can talk about it. I don't know if now or later, and I think you may have had other panels in the morning talking about that, but there's sides to AI that kind of the dark side of AI. So there's dangers that kids, if you start really early, need to be aware of. How early do you start? I don't have an answer to that. I'm not a K-12 educator, but by the time they get to college, they are AI savvy. So it's more about how do you leverage that productivity tool in a critical thinking way, as I mentioned, not just to recite materials, because that you can't give these assignments anymore. So your assignments need to be more intelligent, the curriculum needs to be redesigned, new business models need to be incorporated into the curriculum. So that's how I see that.
And Daryl, I'd like to add to that, because I have been with Tibetan trying to figure out, the goal is cradle to grave, but then the practicality of it is that I first started with other tech entrepreneurs and have been expanding out. So I'll say, for as far as teaching about innovation and intellectual property, the youngest I've been able to do is fourth graders, so 10-year-olds. They're very engaged. It all goes to how accessible you make the curriculum versus what it is that you're teaching. So when I was translated down to their level, say, for example, I'm teaching them about intellectual property and patents, I first start off by saying, it's about pictures and paragraphs, right? And then we go from there. Then with Dan said about gamification, then the first patent I filed for was the first one-strap backpack. Kids can relate to that. I'm not going to do satellite radio, right? So everyone could relate to the backpack. So I showed them it and then told my story and taught them about the pictures and paragraphs, and then had them, do their own innovations, draw their pictures and write their paragraphs.
Tibetan, by the way, if you went to the website, it says the science of turning imagination into reality. Now that sounds like a perfect byline for an AI company.
Yeah, no,
So
exactly.
Are you going to AI education?
Yes, I already am. I try to make it, I like to use the term edutainment. So I'm integrating AI into the things that we teach. And
Are you considering a stock offering?
Not yet. Not for Tibetan. My other two companies, especially the one in esports, may at some day go public, because it's such a huge scale. But for Tibetan, it's not venture backed, I self-funded it. And you'll see one of the ways that we're incorporating AI, we're using creativity as an entry point, because everyone's creative, and then backing into how we did it. So the youngest group, as far as dealing with teaching innovation and intellectual property and AI, and some of these future-facing technologies like the metaverse, AI would fit into that. was 10-year-olds, and they ate it up. You know, we had an ice cream party. People, whoever did the best innovation with, you know, was going to get these prizes, and they innovated some really cool things using like augmented reality. I mean, it wasn't stuffed animals. I was shocked at how technically savvy it was. And then the oldest cohort was, I went into a retirement home last year, and the oldest was 102. And the median age was in the late 80s, and they were like, we studied tech before you were even born. Of course we're still interested in it, but no one comes around and tells, you know, upskills us on the latest technology. And one other point to that, to like sort of as a personal experience of how accessible it is. So I was born in '68, and in the '70s, yeah, my first computer also was a Commodore 64. In the '70s, I started this deep interest in tech and computer programming, et cetera. So before, it wasn't taught in schools, right? So I went to a library, I got books on it, and I started teaching myself to code using book, paper, and pencil. Because you don't need a computer to learn to code, you just need the computer to know if you're right. Anyone that's in computer science knows that that's the case. I was so hungry for it. The kids today would be hungry for it, and they would. And I was able to teach myself, and as a self-taught coder, was able to get into Cornell, College of Engineering, Computer Science. So, you know, the kids are today, because I was around that age, I want to say 8 or 9 when I first started doing that, they could easily pick up AI. They will be curious about it because they're hearing it everywhere, and they will seek it out on their own. It's sort of like sex education. If we don't get in there and teach them, they're going to learn it themselves, like especially with YouTube and all that other stuff, as well as be possibly influenced in a way that we don't want from outside forces.
Thanks. I want to save
Daryl?
time for our Q&A. Yeah.
We have time for a couple of questions.
All right.
Okay.
Couple big 2.
Yes.
Okay. We'll take both questions together. Wait for the mic, please. And do we have another question from the audience? Yes, one from the front. So one at the back and one in front. If you could raise your hand so that they know where to go. And if you would, just say your name and affiliation, please.
Oh, yeah. So my name is Alexandra Hanrahan. I'm a physician, pulmonary critical care physician at Northwestern Hospital. So I love how Dan said that we have to get away from memorization and like teach kids and everyone how to do critical thinking and design thinking. So how do you see education then moving forward, since like everything in this country is based on standardized tests?
Okay, hang on. Standardized tests, and then we'll take both questions together. So can you pass the mic to the front, please?
So my question is about technology transfer.
Name and affiliation for the folks who
I'm
were not in the earlier
Gluten. I
session.
spoke an hour ago.
They may not have been at the earlier session.
Sorry, yeah.
So what's your name and affiliation?
Albie Gluten. I'm a
Thank you.
musician and technologist. I'm curious about what's been happening in technology in the university as compared to the private sector. It used to be that a lot of the great inventions, whether it was Facebook or Google, came out of people beginning their work in university, and now there's been a large transfer of university brain trust to private sector. And the private sector has been hiring a lot of the smartest AI people. I'm curious to know your thoughts about that.
Okay, Dan?
So thanks for that question. Boy, you teed it up for me. You're in Northwestern University, which both of those things are very applicable. One, we have the record for tech transfer with Lyrica that was discovered here. And we are pioneering, and we send all of our freshmen to 2 classes out of 3 in a quarter system to a design thinking class. And that, so I wouldn't call it AI thinking, but I would say design thinking allows you to break off from that traditional analytical regurgitation and gives you problems that are very challenging to find. And they get into problem finding and framing, get into the root of the problem, need finding. It's a human-centered type of process I call stakeholder because we expand it, and try to look at the problem in a more holistic way, find out where the real problem is and bring a focus to it and solve those problems. That process in itself is facilitated by AI, but it still requires the critical thinking of the students to immerse themselves into it in a way that they can find the unmet and unarticulated needs and then bring a focus to that. So I think that in itself is a mental disciplinary practice. Hard to break sometimes when, you know, the existing structure of school has been so dogmatic in the standardized tests, et cetera, but, you know, you start them early and then we take them through it progressively all the way till they graduate, and even with Professor Connolly in graduate school, that's a core center of Northwestern design and, you know, education.
Thanks. Anybody wants to take the second question?
Can I
Yeah, Efrat, go ahead.
answer? Okay. I have two answers to that. Not specifically to the, to the tech transfer and also to how industry and university interact. So first of all, I want to draw everyone's attention. So that Stanford has a really unique model. There's the Hay Institute, standing for Human-Centered AI Research. It was a big deal. It was launched 3 years ago. There's 3 pillars to that. It's a collaboration between industry and academia. So collaboration with industry is absolutely critical for AI because the computing resources and the money required is beyond the scope of any one university, even Stanford or even Northwestern. So an institution like that, and they call themselves a startup academic institution because they're trying a new model, and I welcome everybody to look at the Hay Institute, HAI, doing research, doing education, and doing policy. So policy is really, really important. Number 2, I wanna end with a story because I'm here in Malaysia, and we're visiting companies, and I just want to kind of tell a story that would exemplify the power of AI education in transforming countries. So yesterday we visited an agricultural technology company. It started by actually a few Malaysians that went to Cornell. They got computer science education in data science, came back to Malaysia and started this company that is a combination of robotics for education, for agriculture. As you know, palm oil is the #1 industry here in Malaysia, as well as, so they have a fleet of drones that are flying around, collecting data, analyzing data, and they showed us the picture, and it's mind-blowing, and it completely transformed, especially the small farmers here, or it's kind of a distributed industry. There's some big landowners and smaller landowners, and they offer it as a service. So it's a very innovative business model. So the drones are collecting AI data, and you can see where the sick trees are and where you need to do more work and where there's not enough irrigation. And then the data goes down to robots that are roaming these plantations and doing irrigation and doing pesticides. So this is exactly the kind of example of how AI education, maybe in the US too, can be transforming entire countries, entire industries. So that's really the future, and it's a lot of it is going to come from university, either university technology or university education that is then carried all over the world. So,
All right, thank you, Ed. We are at time, so please join me in thanking our panelists.